Do you ever just witness a Roblox game, or just any game for that matter, that you look at with a critical eye whilst everybody just adores it? I have experienced that tenfold with the Roblox title Piggy. Piggy, developed by Minitoon, is a Roblox horror game that has gameplay akin to the indie horror title Granny. This game takes an episodic approach to the structure of the game, having levels in multiple games or chapters in books. This game also borrows inspiration from the British TV series Peppa Pig for the foundation for the character designs in the game, creating this incredibly bizarre amalgamation of Granny and Peppa Pig. This game is widespread for having an actual narrative and story, and its supposedly fun tweak on the Granny formula now being in multiplayer and being significantly swifter than Granny's gameplay. And when I mean this game is widespread, I mean it's widespread. Now, I've always been very critical of this game, being incredibly skeptical of its popularity. However, this game has progressed quite further since I was first skeptical of it, so why not give it a look? Booting up the game and choosing a map, most players will typically start out as a Robloxian with a decent range of movement options. Players can crouch, use doors around them to actually hinder the enemy, and even use some special abilities, all to the advantage of the player. These special abilities are actually quite unique and useful while still being limited enough to not be overpowered. The additions of sprinting, creating a clone of yourself, and using an item that essentially is an X-ray crafts this game to be a more unique experience for the player's end. Utilizing all these movement options can help you accomplish your goal in this game, which is to escape. Escaping is not as simple as you would initially think, though, as escaping requires you to locate and utilize specific items and keys that may be used in specific locations that also house specific tools and keys. These supposed tools and keys can range from hammers to key cards to candles to dynamite to boards to carrots. I've definitely seen this formula of gameplay before, namely, but I do think it's definitely quite fleshed out in this game. I quite enjoyed the variety in the tools you have to utilize in Piggy, and this gameplay style works incredibly well with the main antagonist of this game, Piggy. Trying to maneuver around Piggy while trying to sort out all of your items is what makes this game a lot more swift, technical, and somewhat scary. Not really. This game isn't that scary, honestly. Piggy's behavior depends on what game mode you set them to, and you also have to factor in that, just like you, Piggy also has special abilities. Piggy can utilize just regular bear traps, snowmen that stun you, mice that locate you, teleporters, even black holes. You also should be wary of how Piggy acts in a certain round. This is because the enemy can act in a multitude of ways due to the various game modes in Piggy, with my favorite being bot because I get to play this game single player, which is kind of hard. And also because Piggy's AI is actually not that bad. I've noted that Piggy's AI is actually pretty intelligent as it constantly retraces where you currently are in the map. Plus, it typically even patrols when it can't find anybody. So that's good, I guess. Also, while this doesn't technically apply to the gameplay per se, we need to talk about these character designs. Some of them are great and some of them are okay. There are indeed a lot of actually really well constructed character models in this game, such as
Sylvis Sentinel Grove and Cracksacord.
Thanks. But nonetheless, I find that the spherical animal heads often look really bizarre on top of the more rigid humanoid bodies. Not abysmal or anything, but I would definitely tweak this if I was in charge of Piggy. But ignoring all of those gripes, this game is actually pretty fun, and I don't really get why I trashed on it so much back in the day. I just kinda like the fast-paced puzzles paired with the decent moveset you can pull off. But the number one thing that makes this game for most people is definitely the chapters and the story progression in Piggy. If you were to copy and paste the storyline page on the Piggy wiki and copy it into Google Docs with a decent font size, you would find that Piggy's storyline is over 14 pages long. Not to mention that this game has an hour's worth of cutscenes, and the cutscenes don't even account for some of the secret snippets of lore found in Piggy's storyline. So you know what? Let's go over this story. The good thing about this storyline is it actually plays very well into each chapter's map. Which means, don't worry, we're still talking about gameplay here. I'll be reviewing each and every single chapter in both books of Piggy, factoring in how creative the objectives are, how balanced the map is for the player and Piggy, and the building. This is gonna take a bit, so let's just get started. In the Piggy storyline, you, yes, you, are a police officer located in the fictional island known as Lucella, and your goal in the beginning of the game is to find somebody called Georgie Piggy. We decide to start our search in this house, but before we can really do anything, kidnapping occurs. This map introduces the very basics of Piggy, having keys, hammers, codes, very basic in the grand scheme of this game. And in addition, there are a lot of escape routes for the player to utilize while still being cramped enough for the Piggy to snag you. No real complaints with this one, so 6 out of 10. After we escape the house, we decide to head back to the Lucella Police Department to report that monster we encountered. But what a surprise, another one of those monsters gets inside the station. This map, in my opinion, is a step up from House. It retains the same good qualities as House, having good balancing, a good layout, but still feeling puzzling. And the decoration on this one is actually pretty nice, so I'll give this a 6.5 out of 10. After we locate Doggy, we fill up his car and skedaddle. We have a nice little drive before our car runs out of gas right next to this gallery. You and Doggy decide to go into this gallery to seek shelter, but that doesn't work apparently. Welcome to the map that even the creator of this game doesn't even like. This map is very cramped, making it very hard on the players. This spiral staircase is a headache especially. Everything else about this map is nothing to write home about, so this gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Now, this is where the story really gets desperate because after we escape, we currently live in a forest. Fast forward 4 weeks of homelessness, and we wake up to Doggy not exactly doing too well. He's pretty much infected. Right next to Doggy is an empty bottle that looks like a potion. How convenient. Now, this map is actually pretty good, however, I would say this map pretty much has the opposite balancing of gallery. Instead of being way too cramped for the players, I find this map way too open for the Piggy. Remember, these maps have to be just a little cramped on the player's end to help the balancing. Perhaps it's a bit too spacious for the Piggy to win successfully, but pretty much everything else about this map I actually do find enjoyment in. This map is just overall great. I love the dark atmosphere, the building, and the puzzles a lot. As we dip from the forest, leaving Doggy behind, we find a walkie-talkie. This walkie-talkie has a person on the other end requesting you to escape his friend from a school. Naturally, though, you get chased. This is getting old. But to make up for it, you actually do find this guy's friend, which is Bunny. And now this map is actually pretty decent, all things to consider. Not much to critique about it, honestly. It has a ton of long hallways that pretty much all look the same visually, but it's nothing huge, so 6 out of 10. This map, though, actually contains a lot of hints that pertain to the Piggy storyline, like yet another drank potion bottle and this chalkboard. Taking each character of this chalkboard and forwarding it 9 spaces on the alphabet nets us this. Alright then, we can establish so far that this epidemic, at the very least, stemmed from the consumption of a substance, and those who have caught this infection are still sentient. After we leave, we escape into the sewers. You and Bunny meet up with the man found on the other side of the walkie-talkie. Man, this guy looks more out of place than we do. While you talk to this guy, you fall unconscious talking to him, and wake up in a hospital. Now, apparently, right after we wake up, we don't have much time left, as one of the doctors in this facility has been infected, much like how the past enemies acted. Probably, in my opinion, my personal favorite map in this game so far. The decoration on this map really sells this map for me because of how just disheveled and just completely cramped this entire map just feels. 6.5 out of 10. Let's go over some notes again. Why not? This note details a cure for a certain illness, and this note states that something is being tested upon a family. A family. Wait, why does the dad have a dress? Let's get back to escaping, though. You and Bunny plan to escape the hospital through Mr. P's helicopter, but unfortunately, Mr. P decided to leave before we could get out in time. Which means we're gonna have to use the metro to get out of this place. This map is actually pretty good, all things considered. It's small enough to get caught up on, but still a little spacious to make it fair on the players. The puzzles are actually kinda lackluster in this map, so I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 10. This map has some pretty cryptic notes from Mr. P detailing how he needs to find a cure for her, whoever that is. Moving right back to the cutscenes, it's revealed that Bunny is not doing all too well, as she, quote, drank the potion. This was given to her by Mr. P, and I think we can insinuate what this means. So unfortunately, we just have to leave without her and take the train we just fixed. The metro takes us to Mr. P's carnival, where we think we can solve this once and for all by finally confronting this guy. This map right here, though, it gets a bad rap. Yes, I do think it's very unbalanced, being incredibly skewed towards the player's side, and the layout on this one is really boring. But the decoration, the unique puzzles that have to do with playing carnival games, it's not that bad actually. But I really don't like playing this one. It's a bit too easy for me. So, 5.5 out of 10. An interesting thing of note that can be found right on this chapter is a little note left by a TSP. This TSP claims that whatever happened to Doggy and Foxy was deserved. So who is TSP and what are the relations with Foxy and Doggy? Who knows? As we escape, we're just about to get hit from Foxy. Because of this, Pony tries to halt him and then this happens. After that's been dealt with, we're introduced with 2 new characters, Pony and Zizzy. These two make partner with you and decide to take you to their safe place, which is right here. Oh, this leads us to Chapter 9, City, which, let me preface by saying this is probably my favorite map in the entirety of Book 1. It's weird, you would think this would be a nightmare for the piggies to win due to how spacious this map is, but most of the action in this map takes place in these two buildings that you have to weave in and out of, and the buildings themselves can be pretty tight. This is also fixed from the utilization of two piggies in this chapter, which is nice and helps balancing. I also like how vertical this map is, and the puzzles are once again pretty nice. So, 7.5 out of 10. Alright, now that we're actually going into the safe place, we spot a shadowy figure behind a dumpster. Looking for this shadowy figure, we're brought to a mall, and inside this mall is a robot that wants to kill us. Great. I think this map is pretty alright, all things considered. The layout of this one actually is pretty boring, considering it's basically just a square with 2 floors, but all the rooms you have to weave in and out of makes this a little bit more interesting. Not the best map at all in terms of balancing, but the puzzles and how much fun I garner from this map cannot let me not give this a 7 out of 10. Okay, let's get this over with. We open the locked door in the mall, and hey, that's actually Georgie Piggy from the first chapter. Georgie gives us a little insight as he claims when his family first went to the hospital, they turned evil. A family being tested for something, the youngest one avoiding said testing. That should sound familiar. Alright, let's get out of here. We head back to the safe place, meet some new characters, and apparently get a helicopter signal nearby right as we get back. This leads us to Chapter 11, which is Outpost. Outpost is actually a really great map. The layout is diverse, the puzzles are incredibly creative, and it's balanced quite well with the escape routes and the multiple piggies. So, 7.5 out of 10. Escaping, we finally find Mr. P, who is a cyborg now. Alright then. But, just like Chapter 6, Mr. P decides to ditch us. Following in the footsteps of Mr. P leads us to the final chapter, Chapter 12. But if we're being technical here, Chapter 12 technically isn't the next chapter. Between Chapter 11 and Chapter 12, we have Distorted Memory. Distorted Memory is the first extra map that essentially is a precursor to Piggy, but sorta not really. In this specific map, we play as Georgie trying to look for Penny. But as he looks for Penny, his house is quite distorted. This map's building is excellently bizarre, and the puzzles are actually not too bad either. I don't think it's fair to rate this one since it's based off of a previous chapter, so no rating. Now, once we get out of here, we finally find Penny, and then this happens. I'm not really sure what happens here. I think we were about to turn infected. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter because apparently this was just a nightmare. But let's move back to the main chapters. Okay, here we are. We're finally done. Chapter 12, Plant. This chapter has 3 different endings, good, bad, and true. This chapter takes place right after Outpost, where we chase Mr. P, which leads us to Chapter 12. Mr. P claims that we're just as stubborn as him when he tried to save his wife. Plot. Chapter 12 has some of the most astounding building in this game thus far. Has so many varied locations, is compact but still open enough, and even technically has 2 sections. The first section being, well, a plant, and the second section being an all-out review of all the chapters we played in Piggy. The second section is deliberately fragmented and inhabits traits from the past maps. There's even some emotional music here that makes this more intense. 7.5. After you get this Mr. P guy to stop, you are now brought with 2 choices. Follow George and get out of the plant, or help Mr. P fend off the infected. Following Mr. P gets you the bad ending where you're attacked, and more interestingly, going with Georgie nets you the good ending where you meet up with your group and plan to find a cure. However, both those endings are not technically the true ending, as there is a secret third ending that's a little bit more secretive. Okay, go into Chapter 9, pick player plus bot as the game mode, go under this purple card that is a picture of Mr. P's wife, do this all over again, and walk up to Mr. P as you would in the bad ending to get the actual ending. Here, Mr. P gives us the details on what started the infection from his point of view, supposedly. Mr. P was working on a cure due to the fact that his wife was sick with that, in which he put 40% of his billionaire funds into researching this cure. He rushed the researchers hard for this cure, and despite them warning him it was unstable, he didn't care. He got the Piggy family to test it, barring Georgie, and while they were doing better and stronger at first after consuming the cure, they became, you know, the same thing happened with Mrs. or Miss P, but he just let her go. Then, trying to fix this mess, he was working on some cures in the hospital map, where Bunny was attacked. He gave her a rush potion, and because he realized, oh, I fricked up, that's the reason why he ditched us in that chapter. Okay, so I abridged quite a bit there for the sake of time, but that is essentially everything in the Piggy storyline thus far explained. Well, except for TSP, but we'll get into that later. So yeah, after that, we go along with our friends, and we're done. Almost. Okay, we're done. I'm going to take a swift break and come back to Piggy Book 2 sooner or later, I don't know. Before we go, I'm going to quickly go over what I've played so far. The gameplay style actually works quite well with the horror theming, despite the game not being all that scary. The story is pretty good so far, but definitely not as mind-blowing as certain people have made it out to be. And some of the maps in the game are genuinely really fun. But let's not judge this too hard. We have another game to review, unfortunately. I'll see you then. next video will probably come out in 2023, knowing how...
Seriously.